Hello, everyone. My name's Ivor, and I'm a PhD in biomedical engineering, or as I like to call myself, a slave. Um, as some of you here probably done PhDs will know, at the beginning, you know absolutely nothing about your topic. So you sit around, you read, and you do some basic experiments, and you start to think, I know what I'm up to now. I got a handle on this. And the next year or two, everything just goes wrong. You make mistake after mistake, and when you've made enough mistakes, you become what I like to call an expert. And after that, you get some half decent results. You put your stuff in a thesis, and then you never look at that thesis again. So I'm at the half decent result stage, I hope. That's all part of the fun, you never really know. So some of the cool things you get to do when you're doing a PhD is things like this, Bright Club. So I've gone to a few of these Bright Clubs, mainly as the other side. But one of the cool things is that it's kind of like an overly honest conference. Everyone who comes up here kind of thinks and says to you, why, dear God, did I agree to do this? And right now I'm kind of thinking that too. So I work in the field of mechanobiology, and that's a pretty cool sounding name for a field because it's incredibly vague sounding and it strikes fear into engineer and biologists alike who haven't heard of it before. So to give you the technical definition, mechanobiology is all about how mechanical forces affect biological processes. So what does that even mean? So the easy way to explain it is when you look at bone. So bone is actually not a solid material as some people may think. It is actually a porous honeycomb structure which is filled with a fluid. So as you walk around, that fluid moves up and down, and that fluid actually rushes over different cells that are in your bone, and the cells can feel it and then respond to it. So that is kind of, so when you're putting enough force in your bone, such as if you're doing a lot of exercise, your bone builds up because your bone is quite smart. It wants to adapt and it wants to have the correct mechanical environment for the situation it's in. But if you don't load your bone, whether it's because you've got paralysis, if you're up in space where there's no gravity, or if you're just a bit lazy, the bone breaks down, and then you have less bone, and you can regain that through exercise, but it is very much a case of use it or lose it. So this concept is somewhat easy to understand on a kind of whole body-wide scale, but on a cell level, it's a little trickier. So if you think of cells kind of as a water balloon, on the surface of the balloon are these tiny little sensors, and there is loads of these different sensors. So I study one such sensor. It's the point in which the cell attaches to the surface that it's on. So it's like tiny little fingers that are holding on to a cliff face. So as you walk around and the fluid rushes over the cells, those tiny little fingers come under a whole lot of stress. And at that little point, those attachment points, they send signals up into the cell, which tell them, hey, you should do something about this. And then they send signals to all the other cells around, and they tend to build the bone up. But to get better, you're kind of asking, well, that's all well and good, but what do you do? And sometimes I wonder that myself. So what I do is I study these sensors during osteoporosis. So osteoporosis is a condition where bone gets incredibly brittle and then tends to break down, which isn't ideal. And what happens is, this happens due to the fact, especially in women, due to the fact of the menopause. So specifically decrease in estrogen levels. So what I do is I give my cells less estrogen, if that makes any sense, and it stimulates osteoporosis, and that lets me study them. But cells themselves to understand these differences, you have to first grow the cells in the lab, and this is a whole load of fun. Because to grow them, you grow them in these tiny little flasks, and they're kind of like millions and millions of little babies. So you have to grow them up, you have to take care of them, you have to feed them, and no matter what time of day it is, so it's pretty much by weekends at that stage. And when you grow them in these little flasks, they tend to run out of room, so you split them into all these different flasks, and then if you don't want to use them anymore, you freeze them into liquid nitrogen. So there's some differences. So when I tell people I study osteoporosis, the first question they tend to ask is, well, what do I do so I don't get osteoporosis? And I tell them load-bearing exercise. They don't like that answer. But when I tell them one of the best form of exercise for your bones is dancing, because it loads the bone in so many different directions as you dance, they tend to like that answer a little bit better. The next question they tend to ask me is, so are you going to cure osteoporosis? And I say, well, I don't know. I'll tell you when I hand up my thesis. Thank you very much.